Welcome to the Kickass Midlife Method Podcast. I'm joined from a lot of women from the community tonight, considering it's so hot. So yeah, well done. And we're talking about, this was one of the questions that I often get asked is like, how quickly does it take to build muscle? So we're talking today about three of the biggest mistakes you can make in trying to build muscle in midlife and how long does it take? Essentially, it's how long is a piece of string, but I'm trying to break it down to give you some more clear guidelines to help you a little bit. So we're going to talk about types of muscle because it's really important to distinguish that there are different types of muscle. So understanding around that, strength versus muscle, they're two different things. Three of the best ways to track, so how you know, three of the biggest mistakes, and real timelines to give you an indication of, on your feedback forms, you get a place to write down what your skeletal muscle mass is. And this is why we put on the forms when you enter a particular type of scales that do track that, because in the app, it just does lean muscle mass, which is a different thing than skeletal muscle mass, which will become, you'll understand as we move through this. So what is muscle? Three types of muscle. There's skeletal, so literally attached to your bones. They create the movement. They're what you're building when you're in the gym or at home lifting weights. They're more active, so they burn more energy at rest, so therefore supports metabolism. They store glucose. So for instance, if in midlife, often women can get blood sugar issues, glucose, diabetes even. If you have more muscle, that protects you against that because it's a storage. If you've got no muscle, then you can't store more glucose. And obviously keeps us independent as we age, that whole adventurous aging. You can't do it without muscle. So it's both a health thing, it's a movement thing, it's an adventurous aging thing. Cardiac muscle, your heart is a muscle. So again, it gets stronger with cardiovascular fitness. And then smooth muscle, that's the muscle that's found in your organs, intestines, bladder, blood vessels, works automatically. So when we are talking about muscle in the Kickass Midlife Method, we are talking specifically about skeletal muscle, and that's what we need to track in order to see what we are doing in terms of our resistance training. So getting onto strength is not the same as muscle. So, strength is basically partly your nervous system becomes better at lifting, often improves more quickly. So if you've been progressively overloading correctly, you'll see it. You'll see the difference that it makes week on week, that you can do that more quickly. You get better at doing the exercise more efficiently. You're better coordination. You can get stronger without looking any different. So suddenly you can do your bigger squat than you could before, and you might think, oh, but why am I not looking any different? And then that's because that's strength. And muscle hypertrophy, that's when your muscle fibers physically grow. Takes longer, bigger muscle cells, and eventually changes your body shape. So just to put that, to make sure that everybody understands this, delayed onset muscle soreness, DOMS, otherwise known as DOMS, creates, you might all feel this sometimes. You'll do a workout and the next day or 2 days later, maybe you'll get that kind of glow, that ache in your muscles. That is what happens when you microscopically cause tears in your muscle fibers through exercise, which is what you want to do. It sounds awful because you think, oh, muscle tears, that's not good, but it's actually what you want to do. And it's through your nutrition, specifically the protein, that you help repair that muscle fibers and it grows. So you can't do one without the other and expect to see the change. So you must do both. You've got to do the exercise and you've got to back it up with the protein. If you do one without the other, you're not going to see the change. So how do we track muscle? So progressive overload, yes, that's a question of strength, but you also can't develop muscle without actually progressively overloading. Referring again to that microscopic tears in your muscle fibers, it's not going to happen if you don't challenge the muscle to grow. This is why we track things week on week, month on month. What have you lifted? Have you increased it week on week? Things like better technique, more control, increased range of movement, they're all a sign that your muscle is developing. So that's number one. So this is like a real life examples of people within the Kickass Midlife Method, for instance, where you can see a 51-year-old, 5 months so far consistent in the gym. It was skeletal muscle was 43 kilos and is now 43.7 kilos, 5 months on. 52, 8 months consistent at home, limited equipment at the start, but grew the muscle. And then someone in their 60s, 37.2%. She was tracking percentage. Took 6 months out and only did Pilates, didn't do any resistance training, 28.3. So that is also quite a sobering look at if you don't keep it up. It's not that you grow muscle and then you can stop and then it doesn't matter. It will go, and it goes more quickly in your 60s. So skeletal muscle markers. So these are other ways you can do it. Your skeletal muscle percentage, or actually what's even better on your scales, is your kilos. And I'll come back to why that's important at the end. So skeletal muscle, your scales should do it. You can't do it in the app. In the app, it only tracks your lean mass. But what's more important is your skeletal muscle. So your scale should do it. The check-in form asks you what your skeletal muscle is every single week. So you should be tracking it there. And then we have that record, which is where I've got the record of the other people's. Your lean mass is your total weight minus your body fat. So it's not just skeletal. So, and then body fat, track the trend, not a single reading. And then circumference. Again, this is why I ask you to always do at a minimum your chest, hips, and stomach, because muscle tissue is denser than fat tissue. So that, again, it's just another data metric that gives you some reassurance that you can see a difference from when you started and as you progress, that you're creating that change. But as it says here, and we get this every week, don't obsess over one reading. You know, we have all these metrics, and we're looking at the overall pattern. So try to, when you do your metrics, add them to the app and then look backwards over the whole time you've been in the program and look at the overall trajectory, and don't get panicked about one reading that goes up. And then number 3, again, which is why we ask you to do it every week, use your photographs. So interestingly, this says every 4 weeks, but I say do it every week. Interestingly, you can see more quickly in your photos than you can in a mirror, especially if you try to focus on getting the same lighting every day. So try and do it, every week. So you try and get the same, kind of do it in the same place. Do it in the same bra and knickers, because that will show things more often. And even for you, because as I made a comment last week on Instagram, everyone's their worst critic. So I will see huge changes and women will say, I can't see anything. And sometimes it's only like 6 months on down the line, you look back and go, oh yeah, I see what you mean. You were right. Yeah, I can see the difference. So, you know, use the photographs because they do change. And it's not just about definition that you start seeing. What I'm beginning to see loads of with people is that shoulders can be rounded when they start and the shoulders are back. No bums are up there. Like slight forward lean in the hips, that's gone. So postural things you can also see. And then we're coming to the 3 biggest muscle killers. You know, these things that typically you can feel like you're doing all the right things. You're thinking, oh, well, I'm training really hard, or I'm working really hard at this. Why is it not? Why can I not see it? This is why. These are the 3 biggest things I see. Slashing calories too aggressively, like not following what your nutritional guidelines are. They're there for a reason, so that you lose your body fat and you don't risk your muscle. Because otherwise, you're literally the same as somebody who's on a weight loss medication who's not actually resistance training. You're just losing muscle as well, and we just don't want to do that. So a sensible calorie deficit preserves muscle. And also the other thing is, if you're cutting too many calories too quickly, it's going to affect how well you can show up in your training anyway. So you won't be able to lift as much anyway. Most of the time, it means you probably will be snacking, and those snacks you're not really noticing, and they're adding up to way over what you've just tried to slash anyways. Stick to the guidelines that are set, and not eating enough sufficient protein. So as I said at the beginning, your protein, you can't build muscle or repair muscle without protein. There's no way of doing it. Protein has to come from your diet. Your body doesn't produce it on its own. So it has to come through your diet, and you're thinking about the specifics that's set for you in the app. If you're in the program, if you're watching on this and you're not, then you're thinking about 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilo of body weight. But the lower end if you're not exercising much, the higher end if you're exercising a lot. And that is spread throughout the day. So it's not just loading it at the end of the day in your dinner, or forgetting about it and just thinking, oh God, I've not eaten enough. I can't possibly eat it now because I'm too full. You've got to be thinking about it right the way through the day. And then I shouldn't have used that word cardio, because I think it might give you the wrong impression, but it's basically thinking that walking, running, cycling is going to build muscle, Pilates, yoga, they don't build muscle. So yes, do them. If you've got time in your day to do them, absolutely do them. They get you outside, they do boost your aerobic effort, but they don't build your muscle. So none of these will replace progressive strength training. So if your goal is body composition, then it's really about making sure that strength training is a non-negotiable 3 times a week. Now, again, for some of those people who are on this program who are also doing performance stuff, that's why we phase your program, because it's really difficult to try and do body composition and the nutrition for that and do performance. They're slightly different things. And so it's about working with your coach to make sure you're in the right phase and feeling secure and confident about that phase, and not worrying that you're going to suddenly put on weight or that you're going to, mess up your program, because you know that this is that phase, that's your goal, and then you move on to your next phase and you're very clear on your cycles of training. Any other questions that anyone wants to come on and ask me? How important is sleep in building muscle? Yeah, it totally is, because it is about you recover the most at rest. So, that protein synthesis happens when you're asleep. So, and if you struggle with sleep, as many of us do, then anything where you get into that parasympathetic nervous system response, so breath work, yoga, actually even just taking out a 3-minute break during your day and sleeping, which I definitely can do, that is also going to have an effect. So if you suffer from sleeping, don't think, oh, that's it, I'm messing it up. It can help. If you stop strength, then how long does it take to lose muscle? It depends like how much muscle you've got, what you're doing. But I mean, as I showed in that screenshot about a client who went away and didn't do anything, did Pilates for 6 months, she lost a significant percentage. So what I did pull up there, because I thought somebody would ask, is how much is a good percentage of skeletal muscle, because I thought someone would ask that actually. And so there are 2 things to this. Is 50 plus is 28 to 33% is good. You get a 4.7% drop in skeletal muscle, drops off quick if you're not doing regular resistance training. So that's about 27 to 30% is good. But if any of you are tracking percentage, it's better for you to track kilos of skeletal muscle, because if you lose weight, that's often body fat and muscle mass of skeletal muscle. So actually the percentage can be exactly the same even though you've lost skeletal muscle. So actually track kilograms, and you're basically, for your own progress, you just want to make sure that your trajectory is up, not down, basically. Because really, it doesn't really matter what you should be or what you shouldn't be. You are what you are now, and your aim is to always be that trajectory is going up, not down. What is a realistic rate of growing muscle if you're doing the training well? Like, what is well? It's really about consistency. It's about consistency. Are you progressively overloading? It's not consistency for like 4 weeks. It's consistency for forever, basically. That's what creates the results. And that's why we do all that data, because it gives you something, because forever's hard. It's like, well, how do I know? And that's why you've got to keep looking back at the data and thinking, well, I am doing really well because that trajectory is going up. I am building more, and getting that sense of empowerment, not just from the fact, oh, you're building muscle, but actually, God, my deadlift is this and it was that. Can we essentially ignore the lean mass trend in trainer eyes? The more important data metric is the skeletal muscle, yes. So I would look at skeletal muscle. My scales do percentage, not kilos. Don't worry, just do the percentage. If that's what your scales do, it's giving you a metric, and because, as we say, you're doing the other metrics as well. You're doing your waist, hip and chest. So that's another metric you've got to show, and you're doing your photographs. So you've got 3 things there. But as I said, we've got all the metrics. If you were just using percentage, then I'd be like maybe kilos, but you've got the percentage, plus you've got the photographs, plus you've got progressive overload, plus you're doing your measurements around your waist, hip and chest. So you've got all of these metrics to show. Well, I hope that was useful, and thanks for joining, and I'll see you on the next one.